Hello, hello, and welcome to the Coaching Business Spotlight Show. I'm your host, Kat Connect, and I'm here to share with you some soul driven strategies to help you succeed in your business and your life. And today, we're going to be looking at the question: what are the guidelines for coaches when it comes to sharing publicly their political, religious, or other potentially controversial views? So, when thinking about this question, I took a little trip down memory lane. And I remembered 20 years ago when I first started as a coach, and I was so excited to bring my full personality to my work. I'd been working for the Postal Service, the United States Postal Service. And in the last few years of my work there, I had been on an executive committee and I had been required to be politically correct, in quotes, to really squash down my natural exuberant nature. So when I became a coach, I thought, oh my goodness, I can just be me. I don't have to edit anything. But here's the thing: when working with clients, right, I have to hold a strong boundary when it comes to sharing most of my own views. So in that area, I self manage. And it's well known, anybody just goes to my website, that I'm actually an interfaith minister. So it's not like I hide who I am and what I care about. I just don't bring it into a coaching session. But in my training programs, I do. I bring in some of my spiritual beliefs, such as manifesting. And in my work as a leader for the Coactive Institute, I am not supposed to swear ever. And that is something that's really challenging for me. And I have to tell you, there are times when I feel like I'm squashing myself. So the line of how much we get to share personally as coaches is sometimes gray. And we need to make those choices on an individual basis. And I get really twisted when I think about this whole topic on social media because I have clients, I have students, they connect with me there. So there are times when I choose to keep my strong opinions out of that. I don't hold back personally. Of course, I take action, but not sharing some of those views publicly doesn't always feel in integrity. This is why, when I saw a post by one of my colleagues on this topic, a post that was very insightful and seemed to hit that sweet spot of vulnerable sharing without excluding others' opinions, I reached out to her and helped and asked her to help me unpack this topic today. And luckily, she said yes. So, my guest is Gail Barker. Now, Gail has been coaching for over 20 years, and she helps her clients discover and create their own meaningful experiences of success. Gail's focus is supporting leaders and aspiring leaders to build strong, respectful, inclusive teams in which honesty, vulnerability, and bravery — I love that combination — are valued and honored. She's committed to finding paths of ease. And we're going to talk about this also on the show, this whole idea of paths of ease, even amid extreme challenges. That's where I think we need it the most. She leads experiential workshops on topics related to reducing workplace stress, developing clear communication channels, and understanding issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. She's the president of Stellar Coaching and Consulting and a leader for the Coactive Training Institute. She is also the author of What Matters Now: Lessons on Living with Ease. And I was tickled to find out she is a former radio show host, something that I also did, and it's just so much fun. So as you can tell, my guest today is multi-talented. Welcome to the show, Gail.
Thank you so much for having me, Kat. I'm super excited to be here and in conversation with you. I think this is going to be fun.
Great. So we have some questions. We have some questions that we're going to look at. The first one is one I have, which are I'm so curious to find out and maybe discover together what the guidelines are. What do we need to consider as coaches when publicly voicing our points of view?
It's such a it can feel like such a swampy area, can't it? Just sort
I
of like
think it is
sticky and
swampy.
murky. Yeah. Um, you know, it's something I think about often because I have some pretty strong viewpoints on different things.
Yeah.
And so a couple things come to mind. I think the first is part of what gets in the way is a belief that so many of us carry. It's actually something that's been ingrained in us collectively, I think, that there are topics we should not talk about, that they're taboo, right? We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion. We don't talk about sex. We don't talk, like, they're just things we don't
Right.
talk about, right? Just don't
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
If you got a family gathering, stay away from the topic of money and, all those sorts of things.
Yes.
And the wisdom behind that, I think, is rooted in the awareness that those topics can be controversial, right? Like they can have
Well,
such a charge to them.
emotions, right? They have
Yeah,
emotional charge and people get
absolutely.
passionate and sometimes they get triggered.
Right, right.
Right.
And so where I tend to land theoretically, so in my head, what I know to be true is that we actually need to step away from the paradigm that we shouldn't talk about those things and slowly but surely step into the arena of we're actually allowed to talk about them. Because the more we learn to talk about them,
Mm.
the trick is that we need to be able to talk about it with
Yeah.
respect, right? It's like,
Right. That is the trick. That is the,
that's the trick.
that is the trick
Yeah.
is, and that's what when I saw your post, Gail, I was so inspired because you did strike this tone. I don't even, that's why I was curious. Like, I don't even know what you did, but when I read it, I could feel, oh, this isn't about being against something. That,
Yeah.
I guess that would be one of my points is when
Yeah.
we're sharing our views. If we
Yeah.
come out and even as I say that, I'm like, well, there's a lot of things I'm against.
Right.
But
Right.
what do you think of that about some way of sharing that doesn't have an againstness, but is
Yeah.
also
When I
just true?
recall, I love the question. When I recall the post that I made, you know, anyone reading it, I think will hear that there are things I'm against. Like
Hmm.
I did name a couple of them. And what supersedes all of those is what I'm for. And in that case, as much as I'm against X, Y, and Z, if I extrapolate that, I am for a certain thing as well. And in this case, it's about, I'm going to dare to say it. I'm for the peace and well being of humanity, right? And so for me, in writing that
Wow.
post,
Hmm.
that was where I had to center myself or center my thoughts, not myself, but center
Right.
my thoughts, right? So my focus was on that and on how challenging that is when there's a lot of crisis happening in the world right
There's a lot.
now.
I want to take that point and underline it. Because I know when I listen to a podcast and I hear something brilliant, I can just, I want to go, what? And so what you just said, when, and this is like, I'm going to open this up to everybody, but since this show is for coaches, I actually personally think it's especially important when we have a platform, when we
Yeah.
have people we know are looking to us, even though, they're looking to us with respect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a responsibility to that. that
Exactly.
that so I want to like so when sharing, especially on a social media platform, or for me, I know and a lot of coaches have blogs, we have things like this podcast, to first anchor yourself in something. I think of it as very positive, as very inclusive,
Mm.
and yet what I hear from you, Gail, is it's very true. This isn't like a false, oh, let's all
Yeah.
sing
It,
kumbaya. It's like this is something that
right.
matters to you.
Right. And that particular post was challenging for me. It was I writing falls or comes to me pretty easily.
Hmm.
That particular post noodled in my brain for a while because I couldn't quite figure out where to hang my hat, so to speak, like where to
Right.
lock in. And then I realized that there were a few things that were important to me. One of which was to acknowledge the complexity of it.
Mm.
This is not I know that for some people it is clear. It is crystal clear, cut and dried. They take a stand. In this particular case, that was not true for me. And so I had to go, so what is the stand? What do I stand for? And what else can I acknowledge here?
Yes.
And so, as much as I am a stand for peace and humanity, I also acknowledge that this is hard. Like, how do you? how do I stand for peace and humanity and stay true to a belief that I feel is being violated, if that's the case? Like, how do I do that?
How do
Right.
you do
So
that?
do I
And
do that?
and I want
Part
to,
of,
what I just from what you're saying in my memory of this post, and a real other really big tip is you name it, right? This is a coaching skill. We have a
yeah,
coaching skill we call name it, right? It's like actually
yeah,
just put
totally.
out, here's what I'm going to say, and I'm going
Yeah,
to really acknowledge that it's complex. And even
yeah,
part of the complexity is that I
yeah.
actually do feel passionate about a piece of it
Right,
and
right.
think it's wrong. And
Yeah,
yet,
yeah,
wow, there's some nuances
yeah.
that feel important to actually bring in.
Absolutely. And folks in my life, folks who've known me for a while, will chuckle because I often say, I'm a Libra, so if you believe in horoscopes and all that, so I'm a Libra, and in true Libra fashion, God forbid I pick a side. Like I really grapple with the balance of it all.
Yeah.
And I admit that that
Mm,
is true for me in lots of cases. And yet I think as coaches, our responsibility is to be honest. Like, we can't walk around. We are in the job of helping our clients, I think, live their truth and live without
that's
masks.
right.
And so
That's
we have a
right.
responsibility for that as well, right? And we can't let, I know there's sort of an ideology that when we're in business, we have to keep our political views to ourselves and our religious views. And I think there's some wisdom in there. There's a kernel of wisdom in that. And at the same time, I want my clients to know where I stand, because I don't ever
Yeah.
want them to be caught off guard by like a holy simoly moment where they're like, you
Right.
believe what now? Like, I
Yeah.
don't want
Yeah.
that for them.
So
Yeah,
so here's where I go with that, Gail. Let's see how this sounds when it comes out of my mouth. I put my views on my website. Like on
yeah,
that platform, I
yeah,
put views in my when I whatever LinkedIn profile, or not necessarily, but
right,
I'm really honest in
yeah,
those places. I feel like that's a place for me,
yeah,
like I said, to say, here's who I am, here's my
right,
story, here's what I
right,
believe in.
yeah,
And then because one thing I want to come back to that you said you noodled on it for a while.
mm-hmm,
So that's another place that I stand, is if I'm going to put something out that
mm-hmm,
has controversy built in,
mm-hmm,
I want it to be thoughtful. It's not,
yeah,
I don't want it to come from that place, that reactionary place that
yeah,
I have, just like everybody
yeah,
else. I get
right.
triggered,
Which
I
I
get
think,
reactionary.
sure, which I think is so wise, right, Kat? It's like, yeah, like I have a reaction, I have a moment, and if I act on that, it's in my experience less likely to land the way I want it to than
Right.
if I don't have to take forever to noodle, but a little bit of
Mm.
time to give it some consideration, massage it a little, knowing that even then it probably will create, if it's controversial, it's going to create some angst in the system. For me, anytime I share something on my platform, the underlying question is some version of, will this give folks something to ponder? Right? I'm not looking for agreement. Don't get me wrong.
Mm.
I like being agreed with. I like when people like me. It makes my life so much easier.
Yes.
But
So
I'm not yeah,
and I want to even just go right there with that. That just feels like a point to stop on. So yes, I like agreement too. I like people to like me. So it's not going for agreement, but it also it's not going for controversy. It's kind of going for that. Here's the truth, and you might not like it. Everybody's
I,
not going to like it, but it's not intended to stir things up unless
I
maybe
think
it is.
yeah, I think for me it's more like I tend to approach these things as like, here's what's happening for me,
Mm,
what's happening for you, right? That's so like, I don't always name it that way, but that's, as I consider this, Cat, that's what
yes.
often facilitates, during the pandemic, I would do a lot of Facebook lives, and that was my way of like, here's what's happening for me, what's happening for you, right? You don't have to agree with me. I don't have to agree with you. It would be lovely if we did. And where's the point? In our coaching, we often talk about alignment, right?
Right.
Where's the place where we're aligned, you know? And so for
That's
me,
what
sharing this stuff is about finding that.
that's a very powerful question.
Mm.
I mean, that's a powerful question, right? We do talk about alignment and we coaches, we know about powerful questions. So I'm also hearing a couple of things in what you just said. Walking the talk of a coach. So I think we as coaches do have a special way we can present ourselves, and that's one of them. Is that we are open to sharing and to hearing, to listening both. What's going on for you? How is this all happening for you? That to me is very coach like, like a way
Yeah,
to approach this that's actually staying true to being in our profession and
yes,
yet staying true to yourself.
yeah, yeah.
Here's something else that came to me when I was thinking about this in our leadership program, the coactive leadership program. I don't know if this was true in all the leadership programs, but it was a big one in mine. The question, the kind of the concept that full permission to express yourself, but notice the impact.
Yeah. Yeah. So the way that particular teaching rolls out, as I remember it, is full permission married with full responsibility, right? And so the permission is about the expression piece. The
That's right.
responsibility is about the impact piece. And what often happens, I learned this actually a few years back. So I did leadership many years ago, but a few years back, what I realized, thanks to a mentor of mine, is that leaders tend to skew one way or the other. They either live in the place of full permission and take no responsibility for impact,
That's right. We know
or
a few of
a
those.
few of those, or they skew to the place of full responsibility, never giving themselves permission.
Yeah.
And when we can hold those in balance as coaches, so it's like, you know what, I've got something to say and I'm going to say it. And I'm going to stick around and be in conversation
Mm.
with folks that where I might have inadvertently created some harm or, hurt some feelings or, yeah, whatever. It's something about sticking around as opposed to here, I'm going to write this and then disappear for 5 days while
Right.
y'all have your thing.
Yeah. I just think that's hugely important. I think, again, for everybody, but as coaches, I think that's a good place for a solid place for us to stand is that we
I
put out
agree.
what we, so, so is there anything you said something a couple of minutes ago about, in business, there can be some wisdom to holding some things back.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, is there anything you would hold back or what kind of things do you think that might include?
It's so funny. Sorry, my earphones isn't weird. It's so funny. Generally speaking, I consider myself, and I think most people would agree, that I'm a pretty open book. People know where they
Mm.
stand with me. I believe in telling my truth. My brother once told me that it would want my need to tell the truth would be the death of me because I'm just so very
Mm.
candid, right? It's what I do. And I'm also mindful of who am I speaking to? Do they actually need to know this? You
Right.
know, I'm reminded of Maya Angelou's. She has a brilliant quote where she says, tell the truth, but don't tell all you know, right? And
Mm,
and
I
I
love
think that
that.
there's such wisdom in that, right? Like, yes, I will tell you the truth, and you don't need to know this stuff.
That's right.
There's no relationship, no relevance to what we're
I love that. I'm thinking of, I had a really challenging time when I was going through my divorce a long time
doing.
ago. I
Mm,
wanted to share, I
mm,
was, as a coach, I was a relationship coach. I really wanted to share the journey, but
sure.
there were people,
Yeah.
my ex-husband, my kids, families,
Yeah.
like I didn't want to unnecessarily bring things into the public that
Right.
would cause them hurt, unnecessary hurt. That's how I think of it.
Right.
Unnecessary. I think it's like, that's not, like,
Right.
how can I make this point without
Yeah.
actually having to name all the characters or the facts or getting down into the mud?
Right. 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 It's like, what's the reason for, well, I'm reminded of, there's so many places, Kat, where this particular acronym plays in, right? It's like, why am I talking?
That's right.
I feel to share, right? If I can get my hands on that, if I can get my head around why I'm saying this, that is super informative, right? If I am saying this and it's actually going to serve a purpose, then
Mm.
great. And if not, maybe I let it go in
So
this
you're,
context.
yeah, as you're really reminding me, this is something I teach a lot in my business when I'm teaching coaches about business and building a business is you can use coaching skills. Keep your coach hat on. Like, yes, be a human being and be
Yeah,
yourself, but there's so many coaching skills that actually help us in our everyday life. And I'd never thought of that one. That
yeah.
what, wait,
It's so
what am I
funny,
talking about?
right? I
That's
actually just
great.
had the beautiful experience of leading a coactive fundamentals just this past weekend. So it's all very fresh in my head.
That's great.
And, one of the things we underscore is, yeah, at the Coactive Training Institute, we're teaching coaching skills. And these skills are applicable in so many places, whether you're a coach or not.
It's true. They're life
Yeah,
skills, they're
yeah,
relationship skills. So I think that
exactly.
if I'm going to like pull off all of our conversation here,
Yeah,
it's like really, as a coach, be yourself, be true to yourself,
mm,
and remember the like some of the guidelines. So the question we started with, some of the guidelines are just coaching guidelines,
yeah,
right? Like really
absolutely.
just
Yeah,
and there's that one that you brought in about staying, like
yeah,
really staying. That's
yeah,
what we do. That's what we do as
yeah,
coaches. That's what we're taught to
yeah,
do. That's what we're trained to do is
yeah,
hold our clients even when
yeah,
things get messy and
yeah.
it's uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable. And that's what makes it hard, right?
Yeah.
I think I assert that that's why our founders put it into the model. It's like, stay, because that's the moment, right? If the minute things get hard, and there have been plenty of times in my life where things get hard and I say, see you later, I'm out of here, it doesn't really serve very well. There's merit and value in sticking through the hard conversation if it's a hard conversation.
Yep.
And then wherever it lands, then I can make a choice. Now is it time for me to, say I'm done with this or
Yeah.
whatever, but don't. Yeah.
What helps you stay? I'm just really curious.
So in the relationship context, what helps me stay is the recognition that there's something in the relationship that matters to me, right? So there's something in that. There's also the reminder that just because someone disagrees with me doesn't mean we can't actually sit at the coffee table together. Now, I'm saying all of this, and I'm thinking of a couple of scenarios in my own life as well as in the lives of loved ones where it actually wasn't okay to stay.
Right.
Toxicity in the space, danger in the
Right.
space,
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
You don't stay in the face of everything.
Right.
However, discomfort in and of itself is not a big enough reason, a good enough reason.
Love that.
So
I love
there's,
that. So and
yeah,
there's a big difference.
yeah,
I love
there
that
is a big
distinction
difference.
between
Right,
toxicity and you can feel it and you can feel
right,
danger. Like there's something not safe
right,
here, rather than, oh, this is a
right,
little, ooh, it's got a
right,
little bit uncomfortable or even a lot because I don't know what's going to happen. And there's
right,
some emotions and feelings that are
right.
coming to the surface
Yeah.
and you stay. There is a quote, I think it's Gay Hendricks. Gay and Kathleen they have a relationship institute. He says something about in relationships. There's a five. He says just 5 minutes. Most of the breakdown in relationships happen because people are not willing to be uncomfortable for 5 minutes. I just
Yeah.
love that, and
Oh,
I
what
and
a
I want
brilliant quote. And
right.
the thing is, Kat, so there's a lot of talk in our world in the last couple of years about creating safety and safe places.
Mm,
And I think I love it. I'm all for safety and safe places. And the challenge is that oftentimes I can conflate safety with comfort. And so then the minute I get uncomfortable, I think I'm not safe, but it's actually just that I'm uncomfortable, right? And so when I can hold those as separate and be just a little more discerning,
yes.
then I can stay.
Yes, I
Then I
love
can
that.
stay.
I love that. And so, kind of I'm going to bring that arc to a close
Yeah.
around this topic
Yeah.
because I feel like you just summed it up beautifully.
Mm,
sharing and staying and knowing
yeah,
what's uncomfortable and what's
yeah,
unsafe and what's
yeah,
oversharing and what's your truth.
yeah.
And I want to take some time. I really want to know. And
Mm,
maybe there's some tie-in you have around your book. So you have a book called What Matters
yeah,
Now?
yeah.
Lessons
I'll
on
show you.
living. Yeah, show it. Look how pretty.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
it's not a big book, deliberately, because I figure if it's, if we're talking about living with ease, we probably don't need a tome to
Well,
illustrate that.
it's such a, I just, even hearing those words, living with ease, because I
Mm,
think that's what so many people are seeking. Again,
mm,
not safety or, where actually there's an
yeah.
ease. So tell, just like, what are
Yeah.
the top tips or what does your book really help people
So
with?
the title is very deliberate, right? I think when I can focus on what matters now, and it's funny because there's a little bit of a
Mhm.
paradox. It's now as in this moment, but also now as in whatever it is I'm striving to create for. So it's like I'm holding this moment in the grander arc of things that I'm wanting for myself. But when I can focus on what matters, I will find a sense of ease. Doesn't mean it will be easy, doesn't mean that there won't be challenge, but I will feel within, and this sounds a little perhaps woo woo for some people, but it's like within my being, I will know that I'm in the right place doing the right.
Hmm.
And so even in this conversation about like, how much do we share of ourselves and what do we do? And it's like, okay, so
Right.
what matters? What matters in this moment? What matters in this context? If you can find that, you'll find your way to that sense of ease. I firmly believe that. I've had so this book came out in 2015, and I've had numerous opportunities in the last 5 years to really like sit with that and go, yeah, this like how do I choose that? Boy, this is really tough. How do I choose that? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
And
I know
so,
it works.
well, I'd be really curious, Gail. What
Yeah,
have you found in your own personal life? If you're, that what you actually have written in the book
yeah,
has worked for you.
yeah. So the example that pops right to the front of my head, I'm not sure why, because there's loads I could lean into. My dad passed away three and a bit years
Right.
ago. It was very sudden, totally unexpected. One of those things where you're like, what, you know? And I wasn't home at the time.
Mm,
But when the minute I got that call, it, it was just crystal clear. What mattered was that I needed to be with him.
yes.
And so I was there. And there were other things I could have been doing and other things that were calling to me. But what mattered was I be there. Now, I'm not saying that as a judgment for anyone who might choose different, but I think that question is like, that's it. For me, what mattered was being with dad
Yes.
as he took
Right.
his final breaths, right?
Mm.
Somebody else might have a different take on that, and that is fine. Yeah,
So, so is there just a tip? So we're gonna talk about where to buy your book here in a minute, but just a tip you can give people listening right now on how to find that place in themselves. Like, how do you know what matters most?
yeah. In very coach-like fashion, what I'm going to say is that you got to know your values. You got to know the things that drive you,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
things that when it comes right down to it, here's how I want to live my life. These are the things that matter to me. For me in that moment, family, connection, those were the drivers, right? And so that's what had me be there.
And
And I
that's
could.
and well, yeah, I think it's simple. So what I'm hearing, it actually is pretty simple. It's not easy. It
Yeah,
does take introspection. It does take coming to know yourself and doing the work, the personal growth
yeah,
work, so
yeah,
that you know what matters to you, and then
yeah,
acting on it.
yeah,
For me anyway, at times when it seems like, wow, that's a crazy way to go. It's not
yeah,
necessarily logical, but it
yeah,
always works out.
right. Anytime here's the other tip I'll offer is you have to be willing to say no to others. So
That's a
in
big
terms
one.
of, yeah, it is.
That's a big
And
one.
there's an example in my life where I allowed myself to be convinced that I had to say no to something that mattered to me and say yes to the thing that mattered to the group
Mm,
around me. And I got hooked by it and did. And to this day, I
mm,
regret having made that decision. It wasn't one that had a huge impact in my life, but it mattered in that moment to
And,
me. And I wish I had chosen different.
and what I get from that, and hopefully this will help the listeners, we all make those choices. And those are
Yes.
the ones, the ouch, those are
Yes.
sometimes the ones that you hold with you to remind
Yeah.
you not to do that again.
Right. Right.
Right?
Don't do that again.
Don't do
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah.
Gail, how can people find your book?
Easiest way is Amazon,
All right.
amazon.com or .ca. It's available. It's both paperback and hardcover. And
Wow.
yeah, it's a simple general feedback is that it's like having a conversation. It's written that way very deliberately
Well,
because I
I can
want people to.
imagine it's a beautiful conversation because I've had a beautiful conversation with you today.
Thank
Thank you.
you. It's been a
Thank
delight.
you. Yeah, thank you so much for joining and bringing such wisdom to the listeners. Thank you.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.